The throne room fell silent as the child stumbled through the massive doors, her small frame dwarfed by the towering crystalline walls. Blood stained her torn clothing, and her eyes held the hollow look of someone who had witnessed something no child should see. Queen Lyrelei of the Zephyrian Empire rose from her seat of carved moonstone, her ethereal features hardening as she recognized the species before her. Human, the first to set foot in the royal chamber in 3 centuries. The child's legs gave out, sending her crashing to the polished floor. Captain Theron of the Royal Guard stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively to his plasma blade, but the Queen raised a single finger. The gesture froze him mid-motion, his centuries of training overriding his protective instincts. "Speak, little one." Queen Lyrelei's voice carried across the chamber like winter wind through silver chimes. Her words held no warmth, only the cold authority of absolute power. The child's mouth moved soundlessly before she found her voice. "They're all dead. The colony ship, everyone's dead except me." Tears carved clean tracks through the dirt on her face. "The Void Hunters found us." Murmurs rippled through the courtiers lining the walls, their luminescent skin flickering with agitation. The Void Hunters had been dormant for decades, contained within the Outer Rim territories. If they had moved into human space, impossible. Chancellor Varric stepped from the shadows, his ancient features twisted with disbelief. "The Hunters were sealed beyond the Nexus Gate. No ship could have—" "I saw them!" the child interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "Black ships without stars. They ate the light from everything they touched. My parents put me in an escape pod before they—" She stopped, unable to finish. Queen Lyrelei descended the steps of her throne with fluid grace, each footfall echoing through the chamber. Her advisors tensed, unused to their monarch leaving the sanctity of her elevated position for any creature, let alone a human child. "Your name," the Queen commanded, stopping 3 paces from where the child knelt. Emma Hartwell." The girl looked up, meeting the Queen's luminous silver eyes without flinching. "My father said, if the worst happened, I should find you. That only you could stop them from spreading." The Queen's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered behind her eyes. Captain Theron caught the subtle shift, his hand relaxing slightly on his weapon. In his 50 years of service, he had learned to read the minute changes in his sovereign's demeanor. "Your father knew me?" The Queen's tone held dangerous curiosity. Emma nodded, reaching into her torn pocket with trembling fingers. She withdrew a small, crystalline device, its surface pulsing with internal light. "He said to give you this, said it contained something precious that only humans could give." The courtiers shifted uneasily. Gift to the Queen followed strict protocols, requiring extensive scanning and purification rituals. This violated every security measure in place. Chancellor Varric stepped forward. "Your Majesty, protocol demands." Silence. The single word cut through his protest like a blade through silk. The Queen extended her pale hand toward the child. "Give it to me." Emma placed the device in the Queen's palm. The moment their skin touched, the crystal flared with brilliant light. The child gasped, her body going rigid as if struck by lightning. Then, impossibly, the Queen's eyes widened in shock. Fear, pure, undiluted human terror flooded through their connection. Not the clinical understanding of fear that Zephyrians possessed, but the raw, primal emotion that had driven humans to survive against impossible odds for millennia. The Queen felt Emma's memories cascade through the device. The horror of watching her home burn, the desperation of her parents' final sacrifice, the crushing loneliness of floating in space while everything she had ever known turned to ash. But beneath the terror lay something else. Hope. Stubborn, illogical human hope that somehow, impossibly, things could still be made right. The Queen's hand began to tremble. Captain Theron stepped forward in alarm as his monarch's perfect composure cracked. Her luminous skin flickered, patterns of light racing across her features like storm clouds across a pale sky. "Your Majesty?" Theron's voice carried concern no protocol could suppress. The Queen stared at the crystal device, her breathing shallow. For the first time in her 1,000-year reign, she truly understood what humans called fear. Not the calculated risk assessment her people used to navigate danger, but the bone-deep terror that came with loving something more than your own existence. She understood why humans fought so fiercely, why they threw themselves into hopeless battles, why they refused to surrender even when logic demanded it. They fought because they had everything to lose. The crystal's light began to fade, but the connection remained. Emma looked up at the Queen with eyes that held too much knowledge for her young age. "Will you help us?" she whispered. Queen Lyreley closed her fist around the device, and when she opened it again, the crystal had turned black as the void between stars. The silence in the throne room stretched like a held breath. Queen Lyreley stared at the darkened crystal in her palm, feeling the weight of human emotions settling into her consciousness like sediment in still water. The sensation was alien, uncomfortable, and utterly fascinating. For 1,000 years she had ruled through logic and calculated precision. Fear had been a tool to understand and manipulate in others, never something to experience herself. Now Emma's terror lived within her, and with it came understanding. "Captain Theron?" The Queen's voice carried new undertones, subtle harmonics that made the seasoned warrior straighten. "Seal the throne room. No one enters or leaves without my direct command. Your Majesty." Chancellor Varix moved closer, his ancient features creased with concern. "The child requires medical attention and protocols dictate. The child stays." The Queen's gaze never left Emma's face. "Tell me about your father, little one. How did he know to send you here?" Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of blood across her cheek. "He worked for the Colonial Defense Force, Special Operations. He said he'd met you during the HFY War, when you saved his unit from Crovar raiders." The Queen's eyebrows rose fractionally. "James Hartwell. You remember him?" A ghost of a smile touched the Queen's lips. "Your father was the only human to ever call me by name instead of title. He said formality was a luxury soldiers couldn't afford in foxholes." Emma's eyes brightened for the first time since entering the chamber. "That sounds like Dad. He always said respect was earned through actions, not words." Captain Theron watched his Queen with growing unease. In 5 decades of service, he had never seen her express personal familiarity with any being, let alone a human soldier from a forgotten conflict. The HFY War had ended 60 years ago. Barely a moment in Zephyrian terms, but a lifetime for humans. "The device your father gave you," the Queen continued, her voice softer now. "How long did he carry it?" "Since before I was born. Mom said he made it the day they got married, storing away his fear of losing her." Emma's voice cracked. "He said fear was the only thing humans had that was truly precious, because it meant we had something worth protecting." The Queen's hand tightened around the crystal. Through the connection, she could feel the echo of James Hartwell's emotions, his terror of losing his wife during Emma's difficult birth, his desperation when the colony faced starvation during the drought years, his crushing fear when the first Void Hunter scout ship appeared on their sensors. But beneath every moment of terror lay fierce determination. Humans didn't simply endure fear. They transformed it into purpose. "The Void Hunters," the Queen said, focusing on the immediate threat. "How many ships?" Emma closed her eyes, and the Queen felt her reliving the memory through their connection. 7 main vessels, each the size of a city. But there were smaller ones, too, hundreds of them, like black insects swarming through space. Chancellor Varix stepped closer despite the Queen's earlier warning. "Your Majesty, if the hunters have returned in such numbers," the Queen raised her hand for silence, but her gesture lacked its usual commanding force. The human fear within her whispered of consequences, of losses that couldn't be calculated in mere numbers. "How long ago did they attack your colony?" 3 days, maybe 4. Time got weird in the pod. Emma's voice grew smaller. "They're heading toward the core worlds. Dad intercepted their communications before." She couldn't finish the sentence. The Queen stood abruptly, her movements losing their usual fluid grace. The courtiers backed away as she began pacing, her luminous skin flickering with patterns they'd never seen before. Chaotic, urgent, almost frantic. "Your Majesty," Captain Theron said carefully. "Your orders?" The Queen stopped pacing and looked directly at him. Behind her silver eyes he saw something that made his breath catch. Uncertainty. His unflappable, eternally composed sovereign was experiencing doubt. "How long to mobilize the Third Fleet?" she asked. 6 hours for standard deployment. 3 if we skip final preparations. Too long. The Queen turned back to Emma. "Child, can you pilot a ship?" Emma blinked in surprise. A little. Dad taught me basics on the transport ships." "Good enough." The Queen strode toward the chamber's communication array, her advisors scrambling to follow. "Chancellor Varix, prepare my personal vessel for immediate departure. Captain Theron, select your best squadrons. We leave within the hour." "Your Majesty," Varix's voice carried barely controlled panic. "You cannot seriously intend to—" "To what?" The Queen spun to face him, and for the first time in centuries raw emotion blazed across her features. "To save billions of lives? To prevent the Void Hunters from consuming everything in their path?" The crystal device pulsed in her hand, and Emma's memories flooded through her again. The sight of her parents' ship burning. The silence of the colony's emergency channels going dark one by one. The terrible knowledge that she was alone in the vast darkness of space. The Queen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I will not let that happen again." Captain Theron exchanged glances with Chancellor Varix. Neither had ever seen their Queen express personal investment in anything beyond her empire's strategic interests. The change was as unsettling as it was profound. Emma struggled to her feet, swaying slightly from exhaustion and trauma. "Your Majesty, there's something else. The Hunters, they're not just destroying colonies. They're learning from them, adapting. The ships that attacked us were different from the old records. Faster, smarter." The Queen's expression hardened. "Then we'll have to be faster still." The Third Fleet's advanced squadron streaked through hyperspace toward the Outer Rim, their sleek Zephyrian vessels cutting through dimensional barriers like silver arrows through silk. Queen Lyrelais stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Star Whisper, watching tactical displays that painted an increasingly grim picture. 3 more colonies had gone dark in the past 6 hours. Long-range sensors detect debris fields at the Kepler and Vanguard settlements, reported Commander Zara, her luminous skin pale with strain. "No survivors detected." The Queen's jaw tightened. Each destroyed colony sent echoes through the crystal device still clutched in her hand. Phantom memories of Emma's terror multiplied 1,000-fold. She was experiencing the weight of loss in ways her species had never evolved to handle. "Distance to the Hunter fleet?" she asked. 47 minutes at current velocity. "But Your Majesty..." "Our forces," Commander Zara hesitated, glancing at the tactical readouts. 7 Void Hunter, capital ships against our squadron of 12. The odds are irrelevant. The Queen's voice carried new harmonics, emotional undertones that made her officers uncomfortable. "Signal all ships. We engage the moment we're in range." Captain Theron stepped closer, his expression carefully neutral. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should wait for the main fleet to arrive. Strategic patience has always been our greatest advantage." The Queen turned to where Emma sat in a secondary station, her small hands working navigation controls with surprising competence. The child's presence on the bridge violated every protocol, but the Queen had insisted. Through their connection, she could feel Emma's determination burning like a beacon in the darkness. Patience. The Queen spoke the word like a curse. "How many worlds die while we calculate optimal engagement parameters? How many children watch their parents burn while we debate strategy?" The tactical display chimed with new data. 7 massive black shapes appeared on the screen, their hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. The Void Hunters moved in perfect formation, their vessels pulsing with dark energy that made the Zephyrian sensors flicker and distort. "Incoming transmission from the lead Hunter ship," reported the communications officer. On screen, the holographic display shimmered, revealing a figure that defied easy description. Humanoid in basic shape but stretched and distorted, as if someone had pulled a person through dimensions that bent bone and flesh into impossible configurations. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of empires dying. Zephyrian Queen. The words carried undertones of cosmic hunger. "We remember your kind. You taste of starlight and cold mathematics. We have missed such flavors." The Queen stepped forward, her hand tightening around Emma's crystal. "You will withdraw from human space immediately." The hunter's laugh was the sound of planets cracking. Human space, such a small concept. We have tasted their fear, their hope, their desperate love. Such rich emotions. We will consume every world that breeds such delicacies. Emma stood from her station, moving to the Queen's side. Her young voice carried clearly across the bridge. You killed my parents. The hunter's attention shifted to the child, and its distorted features twisted into something that might have been interest. Ah, a survivor. How interesting. Do you still dream of their screams, little one? Do you wake in darkness, remembering the taste of ash on your tongue? Emma's hands clenched into fists. I dream of killing you. The hunter's amusement was palpable. Such delicious hatred. We shall save you for last, child. Your agony will season an entire generation of... The transmission cut to static as Queen Lyrelay destroyed the communication array with a pulse of directed energy from her personal guards. Her officers stared in shock. Their composed, calculating monarch had just committed an act of pure rage. All ships, the Queen's voice carried throughout the fleet. Attack Formation 7. Target the lead vessel. No quarter. No mercy. The Star Whisper leaped forward, its weapon systems charging to full power. Around them, the squadron followed. Silver ships diving toward the black hulks like avenging spirits. The Void Hunters responded immediately. Crimson energy lanced through space, tearing holes in reality itself. One Zephyrian destroyer simply ceased to exist, erased from the universe as if it had never been built. Evasive maneuvers! Commander Zara shouted over the alarms. Return fire! The Queen watched the tactical display with eyes that blazed with unfamiliar fire. Through Emma's crystal, she felt every lost life as a personal wound. Her people's deaths became more than strategic calculations. They were losses that cut to her very soul. Your Majesty. Captain Theron moved to her side as another ship died in crimson fire. We need to reconsider our approach. These weapons. The Queen looked down at Emma, who was tracking hunter movements with predatory focus. The child's tactical suggestions had already saved 2 ships from direct hits. Human intuition, it seemed, was perfectly suited to reading the chaotic patterns of Void Hunter attack formations. Emma, the Queen said quietly, can you plot a course through their firing pattern? The girl's eyes tracked across the display, calculating angles and timing with impossible speed. There. If we go low and spiral up through their formation, we can reach the command ship before they can adjust. It was suicide. Every logical analysis screamed against the maneuver. But looking at Emma's determined face, feeling the child's absolute certainty through their connection, the Queen made a decision that would have been impossible before she understood human fear. All ships, follow my lead. We're going in. The Star Whisper dove toward the Black Fleet like a comet seeking its own destruction. The Star Whisper plunged through the Void Hunter formation, its hull groaning under gravitational distortions that turned space into a nightmare of twisted physics. Queen Lyrelay gripped her command throne as reality bent around them, watching Emma guide their flight path through gaps in the enemy fire that seemed impossible narrow. Port thrusters 30%, Emma called out, her young voice steady despite the chaos. Now dive 20 degrees. There, see that energy build up on the second ship? It's going to fire in 3 seconds. Commander Zara followed the child's directions without question, her training warring with disbelief. No computer could track the hunter ship's erratic patterns. Yet this human child was reading their movements like a familiar language. Another Zephyrian vessel died in crimson fire, its destruction sending shockwaves through the surviving squadron. But they were inside the hunter formation now, too close for the massive weapons to target effectively. Distance to command ship? The Queen demanded. 2,000 meters in closing, reported the tactical officer. But, Your Majesty, their hull is generating some kind of energy field. Our weapons can't penetrate. Then we'll deliver them personally. The Queen stood, moving toward the bridge exit. Captain Theron, assemble a boarding party. Emma, you're with me. The bridge fell silent. Captain Theron's face went pale as his sovereign's words sank in. Your Majesty, you cannot seriously intend to board an enemy vessel. The risk to your person is irrelevant. The Queen's voice carried absolute finality. They consume fear, Captain. They feed on terror and despair. But there's something they don't understand about human fear. It doesn't just paralyze. It also transforms into something they can't digest. Emma stepped forward, her small hand finding the Queen's. Through their connection, the Queen felt the child's memories again. Not just the terror of losing her parents, but what came after. The moment when grief became purpose, when fear became fury. The hunters think fear makes us weak, Emma said, her voice carrying beyond her years. They don't understand that scared humans are the most dangerous ones. The Queen squeezed the child's hand. Through the crystal device, she felt Emma's absolute conviction that this was possible. This was right. This was the moment when everything could change. Human faith, irrational and unshakable. Boarding pods prepared, reported a security officer over the comm. Direct assault course plotted. All ships, the Queen broadcast to her fleet, continue the attack. Draw their fire. We're going aboard. The boarding pod launched from the Star Whisper like a silver bullet, its reinforced hull designed to punch through enemy armor. Queen Lyrelay sat across from Emma in the cramped compartment, watching the child check a military-grade pulse rifle with practiced efficiency. Your father taught you to shoot, the Queen observed, among other things. Emma's smile held no humor. He said the universe wasn't safe enough for children to stay children forever. Captain Theron and his elite guards filled the remaining seats, their expressions grim. None of them understood why their queen was risking everything for a human colony, why she was bringing a traumatized child into combat, why she was abandoning every tactical principle that had kept their empire stable for millennia. The boarding pod slammed into the hunter ship's hull with devastating force, its cutting beams carving through metal that seemed to twist away from their touch. Emergency lights bathed everything in blood-red illumination as they breached the interior. The inside of the Void Hunter ship defied description. Corridors stretched in directions that shouldn't exist, walls breathing like living tissue, gravity shifting with each step. The air tasted of copper and dying stars. Stay close, the Queen ordered, her weapon raised. Emma, which way? The child closed her eyes, extending her connection to the crystal device. When she opened them again, they held terrible knowledge. Down. The reactor core is below us. If we can reach it. Something moved in the shadows ahead, not walking but flowing like liquid darkness given form. A hunter scout. Its elongated limbs ending in claws that could tear through reality itself. Captain Theron's team opened fire immediately, their weapons carving through the creature with surgical precision. But where their energy beams struck, the monster simply reformed, its wounds healing faster than they could inflict damage. Physical attacks don't work, Theron reported grimly. The entity is partially phased. Emma stepped forward, raising her rifle. But instead of firing at the creature, she aimed at the wall behind it. The pulse struck some kind of structural node, and the corridor around the hunter began to collapse. The creature shrieked as its form was compressed by falling debris. They're tied to the ship's structure, Emma explained. Damage that and they can't maintain cohesion. The Queen stared at the child in amazement. How did you know? Dad's tactical reports. He studied hunter physiology after the first encounters. Emma's voice carried her father's analytical calm. They're not really individuals. They're extensions of their ship's consciousness. They moved deeper into the vessel, Emma guiding them through corridors that shifted and changed like a living maze. The Queen felt the child's fear growing stronger with each step, but also her determination, the same human paradox that had fascinated her from the beginning. Terror and courage existing simultaneously. Contact ahead, one of Theron's guards reported. Multiple hostiles. The corridor opened into a vast chamber filled with pulsing organic machinery. Dozens of hunter creatures moved through the space, tending to systems that looked more grown than built. At the chamber's center, a massive crystalline structure throbbed with dark energy. The reactor core, Emma whispered. If we can overload it, the entire ship dies, the Queen finished, along with anyone aboard. Emma met her gaze steadily. Sometimes, that's what it takes. The Queen felt the weight of command pressing down on her like a physical force. Through their connection, she experienced the child's absolute certainty that this was the right choice, the only choice. But she also felt Emma's knowledge of what it would mean. The girl was prepared to die if necessary. That realization sent shockwaves through the Queen's carefully ordered thoughts. This wasn't tactical sacrifice for strategic advantage. This was human courage in its purest form. The willingness to give everything for something greater than yourself. "There has to be another way," the Queen said. Emma shook her head. "Not unless we can somehow turn their own hunger against them." The Queen's eyes widened as understanding struck. She looked down at the crystal device in her hand, feeling the stored fear pulsing within it, fear that had been freely given, transformed by human will into something else entirely. "Emma," she said slowly, "what happens when the hunters try to consume something they can't digest?" The child's eyes blazed with sudden comprehension. "They get sick. Really sick." The Queen smiled, and for the first time since receiving Emma's gift, it was expression of pure, calculating joy. "Then let's give them indigestion." The Queen held the crystal device high as hunter creatures poured into the chamber, their distorted forms moving with predatory grace. Captain Theron and his guards formed a protective circle, but their weapons seemed pitifully inadequate against the approaching horde. "Your Majesty," Theron shouted over the sound of claws scraping against metal, "whatever you're planning, trust me." The Queen's voice carried absolute confidence as she activated the device. Emma's stored fear blazed forth, but it was no longer pure terror. Through their connection, the Queen had added something the hunters had never encountered: human fear, transformed by love into unbreakable will. The nearest hunter lunged forward, its maw opening to consume the emotional energy radiating from the crystal. The creature's shriek of triumph turned to agony as Emma's transformed fear burned through its consciousness like acid. The monster writhed, its form beginning to collapse as the incomprehensible emotion tore through its psyche. "What's happening?" Emma asked, watching in fascination as more hunters approached and fell, unable to resist the lure of her reprocessed terror. "They evolved to feed on pure fear," the Queen explained, backing toward the reactor core as creatures continued to convulse and dissolve around them. "But you don't carry pure fear, child. Your terror has been tempered by love, shaped by hope, reinforced by determination. It's become something they can't process." The entire ship began to shudder as the hunter consciousness struggled to understand what was killing its extensions. Alarms wailed in frequencies that hurt to hear, and the organic machinery around them started to pulse erratically. "The ship's dying," Captain Theron observed. "Their collective consciousness is fragmenting." Emma stepped forward, her hand joining the Queen's on the crystal device. "But the other ships will suffer the same fate." The Queen's smile was fierce. "Fear is contagious, little one. And through their Neuralink, every hunter in the fleet is about to taste your transformed terror." The chamber's walls began to crack as the ship's superstructure failed. Through the hull, they could see the other Void Hunter vessels beginning to drift, their formations breaking apart as their crews succumbed to the same psychic infection. "Boarding pods incoming," reported Theron's comm unit. "The Star Whisper is moving to extract us." But Emma wasn't listening. She was staring at the dying reactor core, her eyes reflecting its pulsing light. "Your Majesty, I can feel them. All of them. They're afraid now. Really afraid. Not just hungry." The Queen felt it too. Through their connection, she experienced the Void Hunter's first taste of genuine fear in eons. They had become so accustomed to consuming terror that they had forgotten what it meant to feel it themselves. "Good," Emma said softly. "Now they know what everyone else goes through." The evacuation proceeded swiftly, the remaining hunter creatures too consumed by their collective anguish to offer resistance. As their boarding pod cleared the enemy vessel's hull, the Queen watched the black ships begin to tear themselves apart from within. "Signal from Admiral Kess," reported their pilot. "The main fleet has arrived. All remaining hunter vessels are in full retreat." Emma leaned against the pod's viewport, watching the Void Hunter fleet limp away into hyperspace. Their formations were broken, their movements erratic, their confidence shattered. "Will they come back?" The Queen considered the question seriously. "Eventually, but not for a very long time. And when they do, They'll remember this moment. They'll remember that human fear isn't just food, it's poison when it's been transformed by love. Captain Theron sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. His queen had just altered the balance of power in the galaxy by understanding a single human emotion better than the creatures who fed upon it. The boarding pod docked with the Star Whisper to find the bridge crew celebrating. The Void Hunter's retreat had triggered automatic victory broadcasts across the fleet, and word was already spreading to every corner of the Empire. But the Queen barely noticed the congratulations and acclaim. She was focused on Emma, who sat quietly in her chair, the crystal device dark and empty in her small hands. "The fear is gone," Emma said quietly. "I can't feel it anymore." "Because you no longer need it," the Queen replied. "Fear exists to warn us of danger and motivate us to act. You've acted, Emma. You've transformed your terror into something that saved billions of lives." Emma looked up with eyes that held new strength. "What happens now?" The Queen smiled, and this time it carried genuine warmth. "Now we make sure this never happens again. We teach others what you've taught me, that human emotions properly understood are the most powerful weapons in the universe. And the hunters? They'll crawl back to whatever dark corner spawned them, and they'll fear the next time they encounter human courage disguised as terror. You've given them nightmares, little one. The very thing they sought to create." The Star Whisper turned toward home, carrying news of humanity's first victory over the Void Hunters. But more importantly, it carried the beginning of understanding between two species who had finally learned that strength could be found in the most unexpected places. The Queen looked down at the empty crystal device, then at the remarkable child who had taught an ancient empire the true meaning of courage in the depths of space. Fleeing Void Hunter ships carried with them a new kind of fear, the terror of encountering enemies who could transform their deepest weaknesses into unbreakable strength. And in her throne room on distant Zephyria, a queen who had ruled for 1,000 years prepared to write a new chapter in galactic history, one built on the understanding that the most fearsome warriors were often those with the most to lose.